Hello and welcome back. So we're continuing our run of new distilleries, and today we've got Aber, which is a Welsh whisky. So this is kind of my appeasement to Welsh Toro for all of the comments that he leaves on my videos. Once a year, just to keep him happy, I have to mention a Welsh whisky. So Aber in Wales is a very new distillery. They were founded in 2018, and this whisky here, there's not a huge amount of details on the label, but it is the 2021 release, so it doesn't take too much figuring out that this is going to be a 3-year-old whisky. And as I've been going on and on about in all of these videos, with these new releases from new distilleries, one thing that you can always count on is a really good presentation, a good ABV, natural colour, non-chill filtration, but you know what they say about there being an exception to every rule? And I think we've found it here, because this is a brand new release from a new distillery, but this release from Aber, not all of them, they have done some better 46% versions, which I haven't been lucky enough to try, but this one here, which is probably what a lot of people have seen in the supermarkets, is bottled at 40%, and it's very clear, very transparent. You can see straight through it, which means it's almost certainly chill filtered as well. And even sadder than that, it doesn't mention on the label whether this is natural colour. It might be. Personally, I don't care. If these distilleries want us to know that it's a craft presentation and it's natural colour, it's up to them to tell us. It's not up to us to pick up the phone and keep asking them. So this one here, sadly, it is the exception to the rule, and I'm a little bit apologetic for picking a Welsh whisky, which is the crap presentation across the lineup of all of these new whiskies. But it must be said that this is basically an anti-craft presentation. So obviously sad that it may or may not be natural colour, sad that it's probably chill filtered, but especially sad for me that this is 40%. And I must admit that I basically only bought this because it was cheap, because to be fair, the price of this one is probably less than half what you pay for most of the others. But seeing that this is a 40% whisky, my immediate concern is that this is going to be weak and watery and lacking in flavour, especially when you consider that most of these other whiskies are 46% minimum. So Aber have obviously taken a very different route to getting their whisky out there, getting some exposure, getting people to see their brand and talk about it and try it, whereas a lot of these other distilleries, it must be said that they're basically relying on word of mouth. They know that there's a lot of people out there like you and I who are whiskey geeks, who search out good whiskey and we talk about it and recommend it, and anything that's good tends to do well by virtue of us talking about it and getting each other to try it. Aber, with this 40% whisky, which is available in most of the supermarkets at a really good price, they've obviously taken a different route. They've obviously made a little bit of a deal with the devil with the supermarkets to get some exposure and get this stuff out there and get it noticed. And I think, as I've said before, that's a bit of a dangerous game, especially when you're dealing with a whisky market which is very informed, very demanding and very discerning. We know what we like good presentations, we like flavour. So to go ahead and make one of your very first whiskies watered down, 40%, probably chill filtered, it's dangerous to let people make their first impressions based on that kind of presentation. What I will say though is that the price, as I said, does reflect the bad presentation on this one. I got this one for I think about £25-26, and if you wait around long enough you'll probably see it a little bit cheaper than that here in the UK. And it's in most of the shops, so it's widely available and it's very cheap. But I do wonder if it's all going to be worthwhile. Is it worth having so many people form a poor opinion of this based on a poor presentation just so that they can sell it at that price point that I'm guessing the supermarket stipulated? Is it going to be worth it to get that exposure, bearing in mind the damage that could be done having people try your whiskey at 40%? There's also a little bit of an odd thing, I think it was on the label. There is a mention somewhere, it's either on the label or in this thing, that this is sourced in Wales. No, it's actually on the front of the label. I'll show you this. Sourced, distilled, aged and bottled in Wales. So let's try and get that to focus so you can have a look. And I find that a bit odd, because normally when we say that a whiskey is sourced, that normally implies that it's not made by the people on the label. I think that's just a little bit of an odd choice of words. I think what they're getting at there is that this whiskey is 100% Welsh. Everything about it and everyone that made it is Welsh, and it's a Welsh whiskey made in Wales. I think that's just a little bit of an odd choice of words there rather than meaning anything else. So that's enough about the details. Not particularly impressive, not particularly inspiring compared to the rest of the whiskies in this lineup, but let's see what it's like. None of us really look forward to a 40% whiskey, do we? It's not what it's about. Is that natural colour? Probably, but they've chosen not to tell us. And that's the main thing, really. It's less about whether it is or not when it comes to colouring, but we really need that guarantee on the label so we know. It's a statement of their commitment to quality. So on the nose, Aber 2021 release. Very raw and gristy. Lots of influence from the barley itself coming through. A little bit of a cardboardy note on the nose as well, which is perhaps not so pleasant. A little bit of a rough cardboardiness, which probably goes hand in hand with the 3-year-old age of this whiskey. Also getting lots of caramel, a little bit of damp oak, and a very curious and interesting note of tapioca rice pudding. So again, a bit of a grainy note, but a little bit different to what you normally get. Also getting some rather nice effervescent tangerine note, a little bit of a peach note, which is normally something that you'd associate either or with younger whiskies or quite often Irish whiskies. A little bit of a porridgey note on the nose, so again more grains coming through, and a little bit of a soapiness. Let's see how it tastes. So on the palate of this one from Aber, again young, you can tell that it is a young whiskey, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker. Lots of gristiness coming through, definitely a barley-led whiskey. It's also a bizarre, slightly herbal and aldehyde note. And I don't know what the cask breakdown is like on this one, but I think some of that floral, slightly aldehyde, slightly grassy quality might be coming through from some sherry casks. Although perfectly possible that it's coming through from the base spirit itself. Either way, I think it's good, it's interesting, it's character. It's going to have one more sip. Slight bitterness coming through on the palate as well, and that's possibly down to the low strength, stripping away some of the other positive flavours and leaving more of that bitterness exposed. It's a bit of sour cut grass note on the palate, as well as some caramel and some jelly sweets. Quite a confectionery note in general. I think that there's quite a sort of sugary confectionery note to the base spirit on this one. And I'm also getting some really nice caramel, nutty bourbon notes coming through from some bourbon casks. As for the finish on this one, pretty short as you'd expect for the low strength. Some more of those strange, slightly aldehyde notes and a little bit of a floral quality. And it's worth mentioning again that slightly bizarre herbal, aldehyde, grassy, planty quality that I'm getting from this one. I get a little bit of a similar thing from the Glasgow 1770, and I get a slightly similar thing from the Ben Wyvis as well, which I haven't reviewed yet, which we'll get to soon. And me personally, I do find that aldehyde, floral note slightly odd, but I don't hate it. It's odd, but it's interesting. And that's really a lot of my verdict on this whiskey, that it's got character. I think that my concern that this whiskey was going to be weak and watery and sparse and lacking in flavour is basically unfounded. I'm really pleased to say that that's not the case. I think that this is a young, wild, and unpolished single malt. Yes, without a doubt, it would be better if it was at a proper drinking strength, but I think that this whisky from Aber Falls, even at 40%, it shows lots of promise. I think that it's got almost an excess of character, despite that low strength, and is incredibly interesting. I think that this one, if you can see it for sort of mid-20s, is worth buying now. If you're after a cheap, affordable, interesting little look into what a new distillery is doing, a slightly different style of whisky to your average Scotch, then it's worth giving a go now. And I absolutely think that if you find this at a higher strength, if you find any future releases that are a bit older and a bit better presented, then I definitely think that those are going to be worth a go. And me personally, I'll definitely be having a look at what they come out with in future, because we all know what they say about slightly odd new make turning into good whisky given enough time. So thanks for watching. Really pleased to say that this one hasn't been a disappointment, not the disappointment that I was expecting it to be. Thanks for watching, and cheers.